All right, guys, so it is finally time to put the new Fishspan Clamber 2.0 up against what I consider to be its marketplace rival in the 2020 Daiwa ALPHAS Air TW. Now, if you're wondering why I consider these reels marketplace rivals when the ALPHAS cost at least $100 more than the Clamber, the way I look at it is like this. Now, if you want a JDM BFS reel that is packing, I guess, the quote-unquote new breed of bait finesse technology, the cheapest one you're going to find is going to be this ALPHAS Air. And what I mean by new breed of technology, I mean the really small micro spools that are super lightweight, that are designed to throw down to 1 gram. So over in the Chinese market, the Clamber 2.0 is probably considered to be the cheapest upper end Chinese bait finesse reel that packs the new breed technology. So right now in the Chinese market, you have reels like the Dark Wolf Ultra, Black Knight 2, and all its clones and variants priced at around $70. And then you have reels that are $100 and up, like the Hybo Arise Air and Elite, the KASTKING Kestrel, the new Flight Feather, and then the new Cormorant that's coming out, the variation of the Flight Feather. Now all these reels cost at least $100, and the Clamber 2.0 is the cheapest out of that lot, hovering at around a little over 100 bucks. And of course, you can't deny, just by looking at these reels, their color schemes, the shape of the thumb bar, the knobs, the drag star, that this Clamber 2.0 is pretty much an imitation of the ALPHAS Air. Now, before we begin, I'm gonna just go over quickly the on-paper advantages each reel could have over the other. So on paper, the advantages seem to favor the Clamber 2.0. It's got a much lighter spool at 4.5 grams versus 6.2 for the ALPHAS Air. It's got a taller spool at 30 millimeters versus 28 for the ALPHAS Air. And it's about 1 ounce lighter in weight. So theoretically, I should be able to swing my cast harder with the Clamber 2.0. Now, the advantages for the ALPHAS is that even though the Clamber 2.0 has a tapered line guide with a big opening, it's still no match for the T-wing of the ALPHAS Air. And the fact that the ALPHAS has a dynamic magnetic brake system versus a static one for the Clamber. But as I've stated in the past, the air brake that Daiwa uses on its SV and Air BFS reels is a dynamic system on paper, but it functions more like a static system when you're actually fishing. So now that we got that out of the way, both rods are mounted on the same Major Craft Corza 6'5" ultralight bait finesse bass rods. I have both spools filled with 4-pound mono all the way to the top. And we're going to be casting 2 lures, a heavy one and then a light one. And of course, we're going to be using the line counter to record the measurement for each cast. Now, of course, the line counter does not give us a precise measurement like the measuring wheel does, but it still is pretty accurate when it comes to showing us which reel is the better caster. So let's get started. All right, so the first lure we're going to throw is going to be the Duo Realis Rosante 63 Suspend. It weighs a little over 5 grams, so a little over 3/16 of an ounce. And the great thing about this lure is that it's got a really good weight transfer system, so the casts are pretty consistent when it comes to how this lure flies through the air. And we're going to start off with the ALPHAS Air first. Of course, spool tension is set how it was from the factory. That means there's a little bit of side-to-side play. You can definitely feel it and hear it. And the lowest I could go on the brakes before the spool would blow up is 10. All right, so let's give it about 5 casts. All right. So the first cast says 88 feet on the line counter. Here's cast 2. I whipped that one pretty good, had a bit of overrun on it. Now there are a lot of fish in this cove chasing shad around. I hope I don't get a strike. Okay, so according to the line counter, it's in between 91 and 92, so we're gonna round up to 92. Okay, there's cast 3. No overrun on that cast. Okay, so according to the line counter, 89 feet. All right, so I thought that was a good cast, but according to the line counter, 86 feet. Okay, wow, that was the best cast yet at 94 feet according to the line counter. Okay, so it's the Clamber 2.0's turn, and I have the brakes set to 11 clicks from maximum. So let's see what it can do. Okay, the first cast, line counter says 85 feet. Okay, the second cast says only 83 feet. Wow, I thought that was a good one personally, but oh well. All right, so the third cast says 88 feet, so we're getting better. Okay, so the fourth cast says 86 feet. Okay, last cast was the best, 94 feet. Okay guys, so as you can see, I've moved spots, and that's because a bunch of people showed up to fish at the other spot and I didn't want to disturb them with all my yapping. But we're going to finish this test out here by throwing a super lightweight lure. It's this JDM jerkbait that I bought to go trout fishing, and I'm pretty sure it weighs like 1.7 or 1.8 grams on the scale. So with the snap swivel, we're looking at probably around 2 grams, so that's less than half the weight of the Duo Realis Rosante 63, which is like a bass fishing lure. Well, this is clearly a trout fishing lure. Now, before we get to this battle, let's go over the results of the first battle with the Rosante. And it looks like the ALPHAS came out with a victory with an average of 90.6 feet, while the Clamber averaged 87.2 feet. Now, full disclosure, when I was casting the ALPHAS, there was more wind, kind of not really going from my back to my front, but kind of at an angle from right to left. So that probably helped the ALPHAS out a little bit, but as you can see by the longest cast of 94 feet by both reels, that they're pretty equal in casting distance, and that's pretty much what I saw visually before I started measuring. And actually, that's a pretty surprising win for the ALPHAS, because I thought that with the bigger and lighter spool of the Clamber 2, that it would just smoke the ALPHAS with the heavier lure, but apparently that's not the case, and it's probably due to the ALPHAS having better bearings. But with this much lighter lure, considering that the Clamber has a much lighter spool, let's see if it can take the win. So strangely enough, the brake settings for the ALPHAS is exactly the same as the heavier lure, which shouldn't be too surprising. But even though this rod is rated down to allegedly 1/32 of an ounce, it still can't load this tiny lure up to do overhead casts, so I'm doing sidearm. And the first cast says 44 feet. Okay, so the second cast is also 44 feet. Now this lure tends to tumble through the air, so hopefully these casts will be consistent from one reel to the other. And this cast says 40 feet, so loss of 4 foot according to the line counter. Okay, so the fourth cast is also 44 feet. Okay, so this cast actually is 41 foot. Now let's get to the clamber. Okay, so the clamber's turn, and before we start casting this lighter lure, I just want to let you guys know that spool tension on this reel was also set to just minimize side-to-side play, but backed off the spool tension, so there's just a hint of side-to-side movement, but not nearly as much as the ALPHAS. And the brake settings for both reels are exactly the same as the settings for the Duo Realis Rosante. All right, so I feel a little bit of wind, so I'm gonna wait till it dies down before I make a cast. Now, while I'm waiting for the wind to die down, I just want to show you guys something that I didn't show you with the ALPHAS. But with this CLAMBER 2.0, I can actually easily do an overhead cast with this lightweight lure. I don't have to adjust anything. I don't have to adjust my release point or cast stroke. But with the ALPHAS, in order to cast without the lure just dipping straight down into the water at a 45-degree angle, I had to do a lot of cast stroke adjustment. But with this clamber, super easy, and wow, the distance is actually pretty dang good. But of course, to keep things fair, I'm gonna use a sidearm cast with the clamber as well, but once the wind dies down. Okay, so it's in between 46 and 47 feet, so we're going to round up to 47 feet. So visually, it looks like the clamber is casting this lure farther. And the second cast says 47 feet as well. Okay, so that cast looked a little shorter than the first two, but let's see what the line counter says. It says 44 feet. Okay, so that cast also says 44 feet. So let's do one more. All right, that looked like a good one. Okay, this is also in between 46 and 47. So we're gonna round it up to 47. Okay guys, so what I'm gonna do now is just gonna do a few overhead casts with this clamber and measure them out just to see if the overhead was casting farther than the sidearm. All right, so that looked like about equal distance to a sidearm cast. And the line counter says 46 feet. All right, I'll do 2 more. I'm gonna crank the brakes down 1 click. Boom, that one went out there pretty far. Okay, so the line counter on that cast said 55 foot, so that's a significant distance increase. Okay, so rather than go home and do a tabletop finish on this video, let's go ahead and wrap this video up on the dirty ass hood of my car. Now, when it came to that 1/16 ounce little micro lure, looks like the tables were turned with the clamber beating out the ALPHAS. The ALPHAS averaged 43 feet, while the clamber 2.0 averaged 45.8 feet. So almost a yard difference between the two. And I attribute that, of course, to the huge spool weight advantage that the clamber has over the ALPHAS. So when it comes to casting the ultra lightweight stuff like the lures that are 2 grams and under, or maybe even 2.5 grams and under, it looks like the clamber 2.0 is going to be the better reel for that. Especially when you consider how easily it casted that little micro jerkbait overhead, while the ALPHAS definitely struggled. And you can see I was able to get a bit more distance with an overhead cast with the clamber 2.0. So there we go, guys. Take from it what you will, these results. I will say that the ALPHAS is a definitely smoother reel when cranking, because Daiwa, of course, makes better gears, probably uses better bearings, and has better overall tolerances. But the gap between the Chinese and the Japanese is definitely closing fast, as proven with this clamber 2.0. All right, guys, thanks a lot.